everything gets really complicated. Socialism is basically an economic thing that there are tentacles in everything, right? So we saw a reaction from part of the American people to implementing these things as strongly as being implemented right now. And in Virginia and New Jersey and other places in the country, Minnesota, American people have said, whoa, time out. way too much going on here with the implementation of all of these socialist ideas. And you've had these elections this week where people are like, whoa, Virginia that voted for Biden so strongly last year, and now they voted for a Republican governor. New Jersey, who voted for Biden even more strongly last year, even more strongly voted against that kind of thinking, even though that governor supposedly so far has had a narrow victory. And then things like you heard in the summer of 2020, like defund the police are racist, and then that got defeated in Minnesota. So we're kind of seeing thankfully, America's reaction to this socialist implementation. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. All right, so back to the fact that we've got a lot of notes to make up. All right, I think we left off with Teddy Roosevelt, and we saw the speech, right? But we did not see the other video. That's where we'll start before we get back into the notes. This is some of the videos I find are more academic. Some are more entertaining. This one is, I think at least it'll keep your interest, even though it's a little weird. But it's going to pack a whole bunch of information, Riley. It's going to pack a whole bunch of information about Teddy Roosevelt into like 5 minutes. Yeah. We're going to talk about him, and really the focus is what I was saying yesterday, why he's so popular, because of his man approach. Does that make sense? Yes. I know that might not make total sense to a lot of you in this generation, but that's why he's been so popular in history. That kind of fearless attack mode that, hey, there's something that needs done, and he is relentlessly going to go after it. He's an avid outdoorsman. He's just a rugged, individualist kind of guy, and we're kind of like drawn to those kind of people. So here we go. Not a video that I would make, but
nurses just know what nurses need.
Because, you know, the nature of us as nurses.
Nurses are good. Nurses are good. Nurses were really good last year. This year, depending on who they are, not so much. All right. You'll notice that, Mr. Franklin, this is your type of video. Again, it's not my type of video, but we can have a really boring video, or we can have a little bit of entertainment. Now, I do need to make one more disclaimer. For the opening of this video, I was not the model. Caleb was. Just want to make that disclaimer.
Of just how manly this man is. Okay, do you remember those
30 years ago,
facts
maybe
that were
that
popular like 10 years ago?
There are 10 billion people in the world of war because Chuck Norris.
You guys know who Chuck Norris is, right?
Turns out they were
So
invented.
comparing Teddy Roosevelt to Chuck Norris. All right, you gotta listen
This
to facts.
episode is sponsored by Great Courses Plus. Great stuff at the end of the video. Now, young Teddy was actually a sickly kid with terrible asthma, but by age 7, he was already a hunter and a museum curator. It all started when he got a discarded seal head from the local market and proceeded to spend the next 2 years killing any living thing he could get his hands on and stuffing them in his bedroom. He then grew up to be a gentleman and a scholar, graduating Harvard magna cum laude and becoming a published historian and ornithologist, on top of joining the rowing and boxing team.
What's an ornithologist? Trivia question. What's an ornithologist?
They study birds.
Nice job. So far, what have we learned in that real quick 10 seconds? they liked to hunt. He was an avid hunter and would just hunt everything, right? And stuff them. A very scholarly person. He graduated from Harvard. Mud. And now he's out there rowing. He's always doing something.
Now, crippling asthma wasn't good for such an intrepid young man, so he overcame it with sheer force of will. His doctor told him, "Hello, Theodore. Yes, I wanted to inform you that you shouldn't be doing anything that might trigger your asthma. It could have serious adverse effects on your health.
You got a sucker right there, Chief. Live fast, die young. You know what I'm saying?
Where are you right now?" But things were all Alpine sunshine. Shortly after his daughter was born, his mother died of fever.
Thank you. I have you for support, honey. Where's Alice?
And so Roosevelt makes like Batman and vows to fight for justice. He becomes a politician in New York City, sniffing out corruption and running up against party leaders. Until soon he became a party leader, until soon he lost support. So he did the next best thing and became a cowboy. Moved to Dakota and dropped 14 grand on a cattle ranch. Again, he displays his mastery of the art of man in a local saloon. The man with a gun trots in and orders a round for the house on Teddy. So Teddy socked him in the jaw and knocked him senseless. Teddy Roosevelt brought a fist to a gunfight and won. Satisfied with his time in the frontier, and also because bad winter killed all his cows, he returned to New York, this time setting out to reform the police force so that his men were manly and not using the NYPD as a cushy political job. Speaking of political jobs, Teddy made campaign speeches for McKinley, and now But Teddy didn't believe in cushy. He took on most of the duties of his boss and started advocating to kick Spain out of Cuba. And the president agreed, but he diplomatically. And then the Maine blew up. McKinley, to his credit, was still trying to de-escalate the situation, but yeah, that didn't happen.
Roosevelt, I'm afraid we're going for war. One step ahead of you, Chief. Also, I quit.
What?
Can't waste an opportunity to fight on the front lines. Yeah!
And fight he did, going above and beyond anything he was ordered to. So now he's an ornithologist, a historian, a cowboy, a police chief, politician, and a war hero. Just the kind of person party boss Tom Platt needs to nominate for governor of New York. And Teddy cinches the election. Heck, he was on such a roll, maybe he could even be president someday. And then the vice president dies, and Teddy's friends tell him, "Hey, you should run for VP." Teddy says no, because the VP does nothing. And then he gets a message from McKinley saying, "Just say no, you're not allowed to be my VP." But then,
Hear ye, vote Roosevelt for VP at the Republican convention.
yes, it turns out the party boss who helped put Teddy in the governor's office now wants him out of office. He and his party boss friend run Roosevelt's entire campaign without him, put him on the ballot against the president's wishes, and he won unanimously. So he and McKinley win the election, and now he's vice president. And then McKinley dies. Whoops. And look, his presidency is a video unto itself. He broke up trusts, he made national parks, he made it so that food has to be edible and drugs can't kill you. He helped promote a federal income tax and an 8-hour workday. He passed nearly as many executive orders as the previous 25 presidents combined. And he panned a man-land-law plans canal. The man's face is on a mountain next to the guy who won the Civil War and two of the guys who made the country. Let us just take a moment and acknowledge his legacy. And now let's move on to the fun stuff. It's 1908, and Teddy chooses not to run for a third term. Instead, he installs his friend Taft as basically a younger version of himself and runs off to Africa, where he kills 11,000 animals and brings their bodies to the Smithsonian. When he gets back, it turns out Taft isn't Teddy Roosevelt 2.0, so Teddy starts rethinking that third term. But Republicans aren't about to give up their incumbent president for someone who was only supposed to be VP. So Teddy makes his own party. It was during his third-party presidential campaign that a man in the crowd shot him in the chest, and he died. Kidding. Bullet passed through a steel eyeglass case and 50 sheets of paper, but yeah, it definitely pierced the skin. So he begrudgingly tells the crowd,
Sorry, friends, but I've just been shot, so I'll have to keep this short.
30 minutes later,
Because I believe the American people can decide for themselves, not now.
another hour later,
And that, friends, is why you should vote progressive. All right, you can help me down now. I'm feeling kind of dizzy.
despite all that, he ended up splitting the vote because first past the post is a terrible system, and Wilson won instead. So what does a man like Teddy Roosevelt do in a time like this? He explores an uncharted river in the treacherous depths of the Amazon. On this charming trip, one guy dies, one guy gets murdered, and one guy gets left for dead. And Teddy gets an infection so bad he starts reciting another man's fever dream. Then one of the most traumatic and devastating conflicts in human history popped up, and 58-year-old Teddy spotted to relive his glory days. He wrote to the government saying,
Ooh, put me in, chief, I can take him.
and he got permission from Congress, but Wilson was a total buzzkill and said no. Then Teddy developed some breathing trouble, his doctor made him feel better, and then death came for him in his sleep so he could avoid getting roundhouse in the face. Okay, free stuff. You want more, Teddy? Boom.
Legendary. Look at all that stuff he did. At 58, he's like, hey, I want to go to the front lines of World War I. Did I tell you he's
Got nothing on Michael Peters.
It's got nothing on this street.
all right. About the politics of this era. Teddy Roosevelt dominates the era as president because he offers everyone a square deal. Have you ever heard someone say something like this? Hey, just be square with me. Have you ever heard someone talk like that?
Yes.
What's that mean? When they say, just be square with me.
Very true.
Be honest, be fair, right? So instead of saying fair deal, he called it a square deal. He looked at the landscape of American industry and what we talked about with those tycoons, right? He said, something's not right here. America is prospering, America is growing and strengthening, and our place in the world is becoming more influential, but you got all these people left behind. Remember we talked about the family that the 12-year-old's got to go work 6 days a week, 12 hours a day? That ought not be. So he gets involved in trying to provide this American dream that everybody has and make it more fair. So he's Teddy the Trust Buster. Remember with Rockefeller and they passed a law that says, listen, we got to break these trusts up. But because of politics, that Sherman Antitrust Act never got used very much. He says, I'm using it. And there was a railroad company called Northern Securities. Remember how this works? Like railroad's not even in the name, but this financial company called Northern Securities bought up a bunch of railroads, and they were all under that umbrella, right? And Roosevelt says, no, we're going to bust up that trust that you got. So he becomes known as Teddy the Trust Buster. And when the federal government sues this company and wins, now other building their trust are going to be more leery of how much they can do, because the threat of government suing them is the win there makes that a real reality to them. Then you've got in 1906, with the help of President Roosevelt, Congress an act. Now this might also be you, but it represents a shift in how Americans see this freedom of corporations and how much government should get involved. Remember when we started talking about the tycoons? It was like, I sensed that half the class was like, hey, that's their company, that's their right. They should be able to do what they want, make as much money as they want. This is America, free, right? Well, the country's kind of looking at it like, this isn't good for the overall good of America. That these companies are growing so big, and at the you've got people barely have enough. They have to have their kids work to put food on the table. The government should have some authority in this. You see what I'm saying? Like oftentimes we like to think in terms of everything's just black and white. Are we Americans? Yes. Are we the land of the free? Yes. Should you have the opportunity to expand your entrepreneurship and be as much as you can be, and that American dream, that American ideal of going from rags to riches, is all that good? Yes. But what about the overall greater good? The general welfare. Remember, provide common defense, promote the general welfare. How's that working out in this industrial age? So this gives government, through the Interstate Commerce Commission, power to tell the railroads, hey, your rates are too high. Or the railroads were doing things like charging different rates for different groups of people. No. Americans said, you can't do that because of Teddy Roosevelt's leadership. And this is a big thing. Again, this might not seem like a big thing to you, but it is. The burden of proof is now on the railroads to prove that they're not doing wrong. See if you can engage your mind a minute. Before this, if the government was to intervene in something, they had to prove that the company was doing something wrong. If the government accuses you of a crime, don't they have to prove you're guilty? Well, what happened with this was when the government got involved in industry, now the company had to prove they were innocent. You know how innocent until proven guilty? This changes the burden of proof to the railroads. This Hepburn Act said, you can kind of equate it to what, like, have you ever heard of the IRS? Anybody in here?
Yes.
The IRS, the tax. If the IRS comes and audits your taxes, you kind of have to prove that you didn't cheat on your taxes. Shouldn't it be that the IRS should have to prove you did? Well, it kind of is, but then the burden of proof is kind of on you to show, you have to show them all this evidence. This is 1906 and how we look at the relationship between government and corporations. Now the corporation has to prove they're innocent. They have to prove they didn't commit that crime. That's a big thing. It might not seem like it to you, but it is. And then, how many have ever recommend read this book? It's by a author named Upton Sinclair, who was known as a, what do we call those people that were constantly talking about all the corruption? Yeah, muckrakers. It was coming to you, wasn't it? Muckrakers. Upton Sinclair was one of those people, if you want to write that in your margin, known as a muckraker, and he was like a investigative journalist that would go into these meatpacking places and would write what he saw, and it was horrific. And the American people were like, wait a minute, the food I'm getting is being processed in these meatpacking places, all this filth and all this other stuff that there was no regulations. Is it okay, Caleb, if the meatpacking industry just does whatever they want? And if people get food poisoning once in a while, no big deal. Because they can't spend so much time worrying about cleanliness and hygiene and safety. They got to get the meat to the market so they can get a profit, right? Is it okay if people just, hey, sometimes people are going to get sick. Is that right? Of course not, right? So you see the blending of freedom, but with responsibility. And in the progressive era, the American people said, you know what? If there's not some regulation on companies, we're going to be left to some companies just being run by greedy people that don't care about anything but making a profit. And is that good for the general welfare? And the American people at this time said, it's time that we allow government to regulate what these companies are doing. You don't want people making drugs that are supposed to help you end up hurting you. Oh, wait. What did I just say? You don't want to allow pharmaceutical companies to make drugs that might. Great, classic book. Can everybody see? I want to make sure you can see. Like, I can turn the light on back there. Right. You okay?
Yeah.
All right. Then we had a coal miner strike. Coal miners to go on strike. Okay, what's the big? Here's the big deal. If the coal miners go on strike in 1902, the coal factories, that's what fueled the electricity. Okay. If the coal miners go on strike all throughout the country, guess what you don't have in your house? Electricity. Right? That affects everyone. So Teddy Roosevelt says, listen, union people, you come, meet with me. Owners of the coal mines, you come, meet with me. We got to figure this out. We can't have the country all of a sudden lose all of their power because the coal miners just walk out. Well, when he called the meeting, guess who didn't show? The owners. So Roosevelt says, hey, if you're not gonna show, I'll just take over the coal mines. What? He can't do that. Can the president take over the coal mines if the owners don't show up? Well, he was threatening he was going to, and this is Roosevelt. You don't want to mess with Teddy. So the owners finally gave in and came to the table and worked out a deal, and the coal miners got a raise. So now they can maybe have dessert. See what happened there? Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, what's going on here? We want to provide a square deal. Labor unions, common laborers, we're going to try to make things more fair to you. Make the owners meet with you, raise your wages. American families, to make sure that the food you're getting on your dinner tables has been processed in a clean environment, in a safe environment. The drugs that are being made by the pharmaceutical companies that, they're going to do what they're intended to do for your body. People that are needing to use the trains. We're going to make sure the railroads aren't just discriminating and raising the prices here and there and not being fair to the people there, because the railroads are a definite need if you're in business. And then this whole idea of trusts. We got to bust those trusts up, because all that does is focus more and more of the money gets to your people. So it's the Roosevelt Square deal. Yeah. Yes. Now, continuing with conservationism. A conservationist is someone that wants to preserve the environment, right? And Teddy, as you learn, liked to hunt. Now, some people say that, well, he's trying to preserve the environment. He's out there killing animals. Well, guess what? Why do we have deer hunting? Deer hunting is a good thing for the deer population. Have you ever been educated about that? I know you've seen Bambi and you think, no way you would ever hurt. I actually don't hunt because I don't know. I support it, but I don't know. I just can't do it. I could do it. Actually, the problem I couldn't do the cleanup. So I totally support hunting, but there are some people that. By the way, did you notice all of those cool things you get to see at the Smithsonian? What's out there? Bringing that in. 5 national parks established. Roosevelt said, hey, as we move to the west and industrialization moves to the west, we got to make sure that we've got land preserved to just have people be able to enjoy the outdoors, right? People want to go visit Yellowstone National Park. People want to go visit these places that get away from the city. We got to make sure that we preserve that. Good idea? Yeah? So 100 million acres bought up by the federal government. 5 national parks established while he was president due to this Reclamation Act. Reclaiming the land, I guess that's, ever heard of Jim Crow laws? Have you heard politicians talk about Jim Crow laws? Is that in To Kill a Mockingbird?
Yeah.
Yeah. What are Jim Crow laws? Those are laws passed and institute their racist policies, right? What happened with Jim Crow was this. Remember we talked about Reconstruction, and the North wanted to make sure that there was enough Southern leaders that they wouldn't go back to the way they used to live, right? They wouldn't try to go back to making black people slaves. And once they were satisfied with that, the North left, right? Reconstruction was over. Well, guess what? Now we have another generation of leaders in the South. And this generation of leaders from the South stop adhering to that kind of stuff. They start going, hey, you know what? They're mad still. Let's say you were 10 years old and the Civil War was over. And you got all these stories from your parents and your grandparents unfair it was and how awful it was that now you become an adult. And now you're not